You didn't learn to speak softly, you learned no one was listening. The silence became a language, one you mastered before you even knew what words were. In that silence, you learned to disappear. Not dramatically, not in rebellion, but quietly. The kind of disappearance that happens in plain sight. You smiled when spoken to. You never asked for much. You made yourself small enough to fit into the background of every room because somewhere along the way, you realized that being invisible was safer than being ignored. The invisible child doesn't crave attention the way people think. They crave presence, that quiet, steady acknowledgement that says, I see you. But when that never comes, the child's nervous system adapts. The ache of being unseen transforms into hyper-independence. You stop waiting to be noticed and start building a life that requires no one. You become efficient, self-sufficient, emotionally self-contained. You convince yourself you don't need anyone, and maybe you even start to believe it. But beneath that calm exterior lies the echo of a small voice still whispering, please, just notice me. Emotional neglect is a subtle kind of wound. It doesn't leave bruises or scars that others can see. It leaves absences, missing pieces where warmth, attention, and safety were supposed to be. Maybe your parents loved you, but love without emotional attunement can still hurt. Maybe they were overwhelmed, distracted, or too wounded themselves to notice you needed more than food and shelter. You needed eye contact. You needed someone to ask how you were really feeling. You needed a safe place to fall apart. But instead, you became the child who asked for nothing, because asking only led to disappointment. And so, invisibility became your survival strategy. As you grew older, invisibility morphed into identity. You became the one everyone could rely on, the one who never made a scene, the one who listened but never spoke about yourself. You blended in, adapted, and excelled, all while starving for genuine connection. In school, you were praised for being so mature, so independent, so easy, but beneath those compliments was a quiet tragedy. No one noticed how lonely you were. Hyper-independence isn't strength. It's a trauma response. It's the nervous system saying, I can't risk needing anyone ever again. When you've grown up unseen, vulnerability feels dangerous. Your body flinches at the idea of depending on someone, even emotionally. You pride yourself on being low maintenance, but deep down, that pride hides grief. The grief of never having your needs met. You crave intimacy, but feel suffocated by it. You long to be known, yet you hide the parts that most need to be seen. You tell yourself you're fine on your own, but the loneliness always finds its way back. It sits beside you at night, whispering reminders of every time you reached out and were met with nothing. Hyper-independence is just a grown-up version of self-erasure. You become the caretaker, the peacemaker, the achiever, anything that earns belonging without needing to exist fully. You learn to preemptively shrink, to make others comfortable, to silence your own discomfort. You tell yourself it's kindness, but sometimes it's just fear. Fear that if you took up space, someone might leave. Fear that your needs are too heavy to be held. And so, you keep performing self-sufficiency, mistaking control for safety, when all your inner child ever wanted was to rest, to be held without earning it. Invisibility doesn't always mean being ignored outright. Sometimes it's growing up in a family where the loudest voices always drowned yours out. Sometimes it's being the easy child because someone else was always in crisis. Sometimes it's being praised for not causing trouble when, in truth, you were silently crumbling. The invisible child learns to internalize their pain, to process everything alone, to never inconvenience anyone. They develop emotional hypervigilance, scanning every room for shifts in tone, for cues that tell them how to behave. They become experts in empathy, but strangers to their own emotions. And yet, the cost of invisibility is profound. Because when you spend years not being seen, you start to forget what you look like. Your preferences blur into other people's desires. Your voice becomes quiet, not from shyness, but from disuse. You lose touch with the spontaneous, messy parts of yourself, the parts that laugh too loud, cry too hard, dream too big. You start to feel hollow, even in moments of success. Because without authentic connection, achievement feels like applause in an empty room. The tragedy of the invisible child is that they often grow into adults who attract people who cannot see them either. They gravitate toward emotionally unavailable partners because it feels familiar. They find comfort in one-sided relationships because at least there, invisibility feels predictable. They might even choose careers or lifestyles that demand constant competence, but offer no real emotional nourishment. It's not that they want to suffer, it's that they're reenacting the only kind of love they've ever known. Love that notices your usefulness, but not your soul. Healing for the invisible child begins in the smallest moments. When you catch yourself apologizing for existing and pause instead. When you let someone see your pain without rushing to minimize it. When you say, I need help, and resist the urge to follow it with, but it's okay if you can't. It begins when you stop treating your independence as proof of worth and start treating your vulnerability as truth. Because healing isn't about becoming more visible to others, it's about becoming visible to yourself. That means learning to listen inward, even when it's uncomfortable. It means meeting your own emotions with the same compassion you once reserved for everyone else. It means acknowledging that your self-sufficiency, while admirable, was born from loneliness, not choice. It's realizing that being strong doesn't have to mean being alone. That being seen isn't a weakness. It's what your nervous system has been aching for all along. The child who learned to disappear doesn't need to be punished for surviving. They need to be welcomed home. Sometimes healing looks like crying in front of someone and not apologizing. Sometimes it looks like saying, I'm tired, instead of, I'm fine. Sometimes it looks like setting boundaries with people who only see the version of you that's convenient. And sometimes it's just sitting in silence, letting yourself exist without having to perform for approval. The invisible child doesn't heal through grand gestures. They heal through presence, through the slow, patient act of witnessing themselves after years of absence. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with realizing how much of your life was spent unseen. You might feel anger at your parents, your circumstances, even at yourself for disappearing so well. But that anger is sacred. It means you're resurfacing. It means you're no longer content being a shadow in your own story. The goal isn't to erase your independence. It's to soften it, to let connection coexist with competence, to let your strength include your tenderness. And one day, without realizing it, you'll look around and see how far you've come. You'll notice that your voice no longer trembles when you speak your truth. You'll notice that your relationships feel easier, not because others changed, but because you did. You stopped begging to be seen and started seeing yourself. You learned that love isn't something you have to earn by disappearing. It's something that grows when you show up fully, as you are. The invisible child becomes visible not when others finally notice them, but when they stop hiding from their own reflection. When they whisper, I see you, to the person they've always been, quiet, capable, tender, strong. The one who learned to survive by fading into the background, but is finally ready to step into the light. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not becoming someone new, but allowing yourself to exist where you've always belonged. Here, visible, human, enough.